Part 3. Apprentice. The wholesale business was likely how I came to be apprenticed as an engineer under James Cudworth of the Southeastern Railway in 1848. It is probable that he knew my father or uncle, and one of them asked if there might be an opportunity for me. They both knew I was madly keen on railway engineering, especially the locomotives. So 3 days after my 14th birthday, I said goodbye to my mother and sisters, and walked with my father to the railway station, and took the train to Ashford. I had in my pocket a letter from Cudworth. When I arrived that Monday morning in Ashford, I went to the address where it had been arranged I would lodge, and there met my landlady, Mrs. Babcock. She was a sturdy, friendly woman who immediately took me up to my room. My room was tiny, just room for a single bed and a washstand along one wall, and 18 inches of space to walk. The room was fortunately long enough for the door to open inwards without hitting the bed, and there were a few short shelves attached to the wall parallel to the bed, as well as 2 hooks on the same wall as the door. One of my first engineering tasks would be to strengthen the shelves and hooks before my few belongings rested on the floor. There was a small shelf for a candle holder on the wall opposite the bed, but no source of heat. A small window let in gray light beside the washstand. My father, I knew, had paid a significant amount, I believe £25 a year, for my apprenticeship, which would last 6 years. In olden times, in fact until after 1800, the conditions were quite severe, and for 7 to 9 years. But now they were less onerous. I would not be paid, but would get board and lodging, with an allowance for clothing and work materials and tools. My father had also generously said he would allow 4 shillings a week for my pocket, but that he expected me to use it well. Of course, the railway would get my work, and even as a trainee engineer, I should be able to do some useful things for them. In the latter years of the apprenticeship, there might even be some remuneration for special jobs. At noon, I presented myself in Mr. Cudworth's office and was shown in to meet the man who would be my master during the apprenticeship. "Ah, Mr. Carretera, welcome. Has Mrs. Babcock seen to your accommodation and feeding?" "Yes, sir." "Now I am wondering where I should start you a-learning. Tell me what you might be good at." "I am told, sir, that I have a facility for reckoning, and that I am good at mathematics." "So, you can add, subtract, multiply, and possibly divide?" "Yes, sir, and recently I have been learning trigonometry and logarithms." At this he looked at me suddenly. "Is that now part of the Tunbridge School syllabus for young gentlemen of your age?" I responded by telling him how the mathematics master had given me leave to read and study on my own with his occasional tutelage and tests. Cudworth said, "In that case, I think I shall assign you to Mr. Henderson and the surveyor's department. I will write him a note that you shall take to give him. I believe that he can, and should, have you check the calculations. He will, of course, have to explain them, and I will ask him also to use your time in learning how to survey, which is a skill all engineers should have. Let us see how you manage there, and then I would like you to come back at the beginning of December, and we will review your progress." It may seem like a boast to say that my time with Mr. Henderson went spectacularly well, but it seemed that Mr. Cudworth had chosen an ideal starting place for me. My only difficulty was that I recognized my fellow apprentices were far behind me in understanding the mathematics, and appallingly slow at calculation, and nobody likes to be seen inferior. At one point, I realized my understanding of some parts of the mathematics was better than that of Mr. Henderson. Somehow, I was able to recall a conversation with my father to the effect that even if you are brighter than someone else, you should allow that knowledge to escape from your work and not from your mouth. It was a challenge to put that into practice, but fortunately I did, and managed to get along with my colleagues and my superiors. After I had learned surveying, I was often given survey calculations to check, or else sent along with a survey team to plan a route or an alteration being considered. However, 14 Cudworth moved me around to various departments, including his own preoccupation, which was locomotives. Through my apprenticeship, my ability to calculate was ever the introduction to new fields of engineering. At the Ashford Works, I soon learned the importance of knowing all the properties of the materials that built and propelled our steam horses. Early workers used what they had, sometimes making overly heavy and almost immovable engines. Other times the boilers could not withstand the pressures. More commonly, Our enemy was inefficiency or instability. Cudworth, perhaps unknowingly, introduced me to the problems of dynamical forces. The Southeast Railway was one of the few companies to use the Crampton locomotives in England, though they were popular in France, becoming a synonym for express trains because of their speed. In today's world, they look very odd, with four small wheels bearing the very front of the long boiler and two large driving wheels at the back, right below the footplate, which had no cab. The driver and fireman were outside in the elements. Moreover, as the 420 Cramptons were built for us by Mr. Stevenson's company, the cylinders were underneath and between the wheels, driving a crankshaft that then pushed the driving rods on the outside. One such was shown at the Great Exhibition of 1851, for which I was allowed 3 days' leave, unpaid of course, to attend. The placement of the driving wheels allowed them to be of a larger diameter, giving the Cramptons their speed. The internal location of the cylinders meant that the alternating movement of the pistons was closer to the center of the mass of the locomotive, so the moment of these movements was smaller, allowing less dynamical oscillation at speed, especially on the relatively narrow so-called standard gauge of 4 feet 8 and 1/2 inches, which the Stevensons had championed. There were a number of locomotives at the Great Exhibition. Daniel Gooch of the Great Western showed off one of his Iron Duke locomotives. These were a 422 design with very large driving wheels. They were able to pull a 120-ton train at over 60 miles per hour, and it was believed that 80 miles per hour was possible. On the 7-foot Great Western broad gauge, they pulled the world's fastest trains for a number of years. Indeed, some of these locomotives were still in service when I returned from Canada. Yes, Canada. I had not met Amelia yet.